He sat alone in the last pew, blind, broken, and quietly begging God for a wife. But when a stranger touched his shoulder, the entire church froze in tears. What happened next will leave you speechless. Stay tuned because you are about to watch a beautiful story and find out what happened next. Hello, family. Welcome to Tales Haven. Kindly subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories. Thank you as you do so. Sit back, relax as we dive into the story. The morning sun rose gently over the quiet streets of Savannah, Georgia. The church bell of Grace Fellowship Church rang softly in the distance, calling people to worship. Families dressed in their Sunday best walked hand in hand toward the large white church with tall windows and a cross that touched the sky. Birds chirped. Children laughed. Greeters stood at the doors, smiling and shaking hands. Inside, the pews were filling quickly. The choir began singing softly, sweet hymns that made hearts calm and eyes close. But as the music echoed inside the grand hall, the large wooden doors at the back of the church creaked open slowly. No one turned to look. Why would they? It was just another latecomer. But it wasn't. He walked in slowly, carefully. A tall man in a dark suit, neat and sharp. His head was slightly lowered. His eyes were hidden behind dark glasses. In his right hand, he held a silver walking cane, tapping softly with each step. His name was Elijah Grant, 35 years old, blind, and a millionaire. He wasn't born blind. In fact, he once had everything: a successful tech company, a luxurious home, fast cars, designer suits, and people who called him Sir everywhere he went. But 3 years ago, a car crash on a rainy night took everything from him. His parents died instantly. He survived, but he lost his sight permanently. And with that, he lost more than his vision. He lost himself. Elijah had spent the last few years building his life back piece by piece. He learned how to use voice software to run his business. He hired people he trusted to guide his company. On the outside, he looked strong. But inside, he was lonely, quiet, cracked. Many women tried to get close to him after the accident. Some pretended to care. But behind their soft words and fake smiles, he could hear the same thing every time. They wanted his money, not him. He had stopped attending parties, stopped answering calls, and stopped believing that real love existed for someone like him. But this morning, something pushed him to get dressed and go to church. Not because he needed religion, but because his heart was tired. He wanted peace. He wanted hope. And maybe he wanted God to hear what no one else could. As Elijah walked toward the last pew, he moved slowly, using his cane to feel each step. People nearby noticed but said nothing. Some whispered. Some looked away. He sat at the very back, far from everyone, and folded his hands. The choir continued singing, but he didn't join in. Instead, he lowered his head and quietly whispered, "God, I know you see me, even though I can't see anything anymore." His voice shook. "I've been strong for everyone. For my staff, my company, the world. But I'm tired. I come home to an empty house every night. I eat alone. I wake up alone. I feel like a stranger in my own life." His eyes, hidden behind his glasses, filled with tears. "I'm not asking for much, Lord. Just someone to walk beside me. To love me not for my name or money, but for me." A tear rolled down his cheek and landed on his suit. He wiped it quickly, embarrassed, even though no one was looking. And then, it happened. A soft hand rested gently on his shoulder. Not a pat, not a tap, just a warm, still hand that said, "You're not alone." Elijah froze. His breathing stopped. He could feel the warmth of the hand. It was small, gentle, and slightly trembling. Who was it? He turned his head slowly in the direction of the touch. He whispered, "Hello." But before she could speak, the music stopped. The pastor paused mid-sentence. The church was frozen in silence. Every face, young and old, was turned to the back pew, eyes wide, hearts still. The woman who had placed her hand gently on Elijah's shoulder wasn't known by anyone there. She didn't wear a fancy dress. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her shoes looked worn from walking many miles. But there was something about her presence that made everyone pay attention. Her name was Ava Monroe, 28. Quiet. Unnoticed. She had slipped into the church through the side door earlier, sitting in the front corner pew. She didn't want to be seen. She had come only to whisper a silent prayer and disappear again. Ava had been through more pain than most women her age. Once engaged to a man who promised her the world, she instead ended up trapped in a relationship filled with emotional scars, insults, and control. When she finally broke free, she had no money, no family, and no direction. She packed a small bag, left everything behind, and came to Savannah looking for a new beginning.
For a job.
For safety. For a reason to breathe again. The shelter she stayed in was cold at night, but at least it was quiet. She worked part-time cleaning offices and washing dishes, saving every cent she earned. No one knew her name. She was invisible to the world. But that morning, inside the church, as she sat near the front and listened to the choir sing, she heard something she wasn't expecting. A soft, trembling voice from the back pew. It wasn't loud, but the words reached her like thunder in her chest. Just someone to walk beside me. To love me not for my name or money, but for me. Her heart stopped. She turned around. There, in the back, sat a man in dark glasses, wiping tears from his face. He didn't know she was looking at him. He couldn't. He was blind. But she saw him clearly. She saw his brokenness, his honesty, the way his shoulders sank as he prayed. She didn't know his name, didn't know he was a millionaire, didn't care. All she knew in that moment was that she understood his pain. Because just the night before, on a small cot at the shelter, she had whispered something similar. God, if there's still someone out there who doesn't care about what I've lost, but loves what I still have, please send him to me. So when she saw him cry and whisper those words,
She didn't think.
She stood up. She walked slowly down the aisle, her hand shaking. And without saying a word, she placed her hand softly on his shoulder. And now, at this very moment, the entire church was staring. Not out of anger, not out of judgment, but because something had changed in the room. The air felt holy. Ava leaned in slightly, still unsure if she had done the right thing. Her lips trembled as she whispered into Elijah's ear. I heard you. Elijah turned his head gently, his heart pounding. His voice was barely audible. You did. Ava nodded, then realized he couldn't see. Yes, she said softly. I heard your prayer. He felt her voice, not just in his ears, but in his soul. She sat slowly beside him, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her breath quick, heart racing. She didn't know what would happen next. She didn't care what people would say. She just knew one thing. This man had spoken the words her heart had needed to hear for years. And somehow, without ever meeting, they had both prayed for the same thing. Now they were sitting side by side. The pastor, still standing at the pulpit, watched with tears in his eyes. He placed his Bible down, removed his glasses, and said quietly, Church, we were going to talk about miracles today. But I believe we've just witnessed one. Whispers of amen and thank you, Jesus, filled the room. And in the very back pew, where pain had entered with a cane and a prayer, sat two strangers. Side by side, bound not by sight, but by something stronger. A connection beyond understanding. The church service ended quietly that morning. There was no loud applause. No rushing to the door. No one even moved for a while. Instead, people whispered, hugged, and wiped tears from their faces. A few church members glanced back once more at the unusual sight, a blind man sitting beside a stranger, connected by something that couldn't be explained. Elijah remained seated, still holding onto the feeling of the soft hand that had touched his shoulder. Beside him, Ava sat calmly, her fingers gently twisting together in her lap. He turned his head slightly toward her. Are you still here? He asked gently. Ava smiled, though he couldn't see it.
Yes.
I'm still here. He nodded slowly. Thank you for what you did. She looked at him, confused. I didn't do anything special. Elijah tilted his head. You touched me when no one else dared to. You heard a quiet prayer. That's more than special. There was a long pause. Ava looked around and noticed the church was almost empty now. The choir had packed up, the pastor had stepped down from the pulpit, and only a few people remained, whispering near the door. Just then, a gentle voice broke the silence. It was Pastor Raymond. He approached with a warm smile, holding a small paper cup. "Would you two like to sit and talk for a while in my office?" he asked kindly. Elijah turned toward the voice. "That would be nice, Pastor."
Thank you.
Ava simply nodded, her eyes still filled with questions she couldn't form into words. The pastor led them down a quiet hallway to a small office at the back of the church. It was simple, just a couch, 2 chairs, a desk, and a table with coffee. Ava guided Elijah to one of the chairs. He sat slowly, placing his cane beside him. She sat across from him, still unsure if she should even be there. Pastor Raymond quietly closed the door behind him and left them alone. A long, quiet silence followed. Elijah broke it. "I'm Elijah Grant," he said calmly, holding out his hand. Ava took it gently. "I'm Ava. Ava Monroe." He smiled lightly. "Nice name." She chuckled quietly. "It's just a name." "No," Elijah said softly. "It's the first thing about you I can hold on to." Ava paused, touched by his words. She looked at the man across from her, neatly dressed, calm, but clearly carrying deep pain. His glasses covered his eyes, but his voice was open, honest. He didn't speak like a billionaire. He spoke like a man searching for something real. "I didn't mean to interrupt you earlier," she said. I heard your prayer, and it felt like mine." Elijah leaned forward slightly. "You prayed something similar?" She nodded.
Yes.
"Last night, in the shelter where I'm staying." He raised his brow gently. "A shelter?" Ava hesitated. "I've been through some things, bad relationship, lost everything. I came to this city with nothing but a backpack." She looked down, ashamed. "I understand if that changes how you see me." Elijah reached for the coffee cup on the table, running his finger along its edge slowly as he thought. "Ava," he said quietly, "I may be blind, but I don't judge people with my eyes." She looked up at him slowly. He continued, "If I had a choice to see again or to truly feel someone's heart, I'd choose the second. Every time." Ava didn't respond right away, but her eyes filled with tears. Not because he pitied her, but because, after so long, someone finally saw her without needing to look. She reached into her small bag and pulled out something small, a hand-carved wooden cross. "I made this last year," she said, "at the women's shelter. They gave us some tools to help us stay calm. I never thought I'd give it away, but it feels like it belongs to you now." Elijah slowly reached out. Ava placed the cross in his hand. His fingers moved over the rough surface. He could feel every tiny curve and corner. It wasn't perfect. It had small cracks, an uneven edge, and a chip at the bottom. But it felt real, just like her. "Thank you," he whispered. They both sat quietly for a moment. And in that silence, something strong and unspoken passed between them. It wasn't love yet, but it was the beginning of something honest. Something rare. Something heaven had written long before either of them knew. The soft ticking of a clock in Pastor Raymond's office filled the silence. Outside, the late afternoon sun began to cast golden light through the small window. Elijah held the small wooden cross in his hands gently, tracing its edges over and over again. Ava watched him, quietly sipping her coffee. She wasn't sure what came next, but for once, she wasn't afraid. Elijah finally spoke. "Would you like to go for a walk sometime? I usually walk the park trail near the city library. I can have someone guide me there, if you're not comfortable." Ava smiled. "I'd love to walk with you." He nodded. No pressure. Just two people talking. That week, they met again.
And again.
And again. They walked through the park slowly, side by side. Elijah listened to her voice and learned to follow her steps. Ava adjusted her pace to match his and described the world around them. "The flowers are blooming," she'd say. "White daisies, and some roses too." A couple just passed us, holding hands. Elijah would smile and reply, "Sounds like love is in the air." They didn't talk about wealth or the past. They talked about dreams, favorite childhood memories, their favorite songs, and things that made them laugh. Ava told him about her love for painting as a little girl and how she once won a school prize for a picture of her dog. Elijah told her about his father teaching him how to play piano before the accident and how sometimes he still tried to play by ear. One day, while walking near the fountain, Elijah reached into his coat pocket. "I brought you something," he said. Ava looked surprised. "What is it?" "It's not much, but I asked my assistant to help me pick something simple." He handed her a small white box. Ava opened it slowly and gasped. Inside was a pair of pearl earrings, no diamonds, no gold. Just soft, round pearls. "They're beautiful," she whispered. Elijah smiled. "I chose them because they're not loud, but they're real. Like you." Ava blinked fast to hold back her tears. But just as she was about to thank him, a voice interrupted the moment. "Elijah." A woman's voice, smooth, confident, sharp like a blade. Elijah turned his head slightly. "Who's there?" A woman in a designer red dress walked up quickly, high heels clicking against the pavement. It was Vanessa Hartwell, Elijah's ex-girlfriend. She used to date him before his accident. But when the lights, power, and fame faded after his blindness, so did she. Now she was back. "Elijah," Vanessa repeated, her arms folded. "I heard you were seeing someone. Thought I'd come see what all the whispers were about." Ava stepped back slightly. Vanessa looked her up and down, then chuckled. "This is her? Seriously?" Ava said nothing. Elijah calmly stood straighter. "Vanessa, this isn't the time." "Oh, I think it is," she snapped. "You could be with someone who actually understands your world, your class. But you're here with someone who clearly has nothing to offer." Ava's lips parted slightly, but she didn't speak. She was used to insults. But this one stung. Vanessa smirked. "Tell me, Ava, do you even have a home, or are you using him to get one?" Elijah clenched his fist. He turned his head firmly toward Vanessa and said, in a low but strong voice, "I may be blind, but I'm not stupid." She rolled her eyes. "Elijah." "No," he interrupted. "You left me when I became blind. You called me a burden. You made it clear I was no longer useful." Vanessa looked embarrassed as people nearby turned to watch. "And Ava," he continued, "stood beside me without asking for a single thing. She listens. She leads me gently. She speaks with kindness. You see her as poor, but to me, she's the richest soul I've ever met." Vanessa's cheeks burned red. She turned sharply and stormed off. Ava stood still, stunned. Elijah slowly reached out in her direction. "Are you still here?" Her voice was soft. "Yes, I'm here." He found her hand and held it. "I'm sorry you had to hear that," he said. Ava shook her head.
No.
"I'm used to being judged." "But you shouldn't be," Elijah replied. She looked at him with glassy eyes. "You believed in me, even when someone else tried to break me." Elijah smiled gently. "I don't need eyes to see someone's heart." Tears rolled down Ava's cheeks silently. For the first time in her life, someone defended her. Not with anger, but with love. And in that moment she realized, this man didn't just understand her. He saw her. Weeks passed. And in those weeks, Elijah and Ava continued to grow closer. Not through grand gestures or expensive gifts, but through time, trust, and truth. They met almost every evening after work. Ava would walk with him in the park or sit with him on the bench near the fountain. She read books aloud to him. He taught her how to play basic piano chords using her fingers. There were moments of silence and moments of laughter. But never once did Elijah feel judged. And never once did Ava feel like she had to pretend. They were just themselves. One evening, after their usual walk, Ava was about to leave when Elijah gently held her hand. "I want to ask you something," he said, his voice softer than usual. She turned toward him, heart racing. "What is it?" He stood still for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. I can't get down on one knee, he whispered, because I wouldn't know if I'm kneeling in front of you or the wind. Ava laughed through her tears. Elijah opened the box. Inside was a simple silver ring. No diamonds. No shine. Just a tiny heart engraved on the band. Ava Monroe, he said, will you be the eyes I'll never have and the heart I'll never let go of? Her hands trembled. Her voice cracked. But her answer was sure. Yes, Elijah. Yes, I will. 1 month later. The day was warm and calm. The sky was clear blue, and the church was filled with people, friends, neighbors, even some who had once judged Ava but now admired her. Elijah stood at the altar in a neat black suit, guided by Pastor Raymond. His cane rested quietly beside him. A white rose was pinned to his chest, and a soft smile stayed on his face. Then the music started. Ava walked down the aisle in a flowing cream-colored gown. Her hair was styled in soft curls, with a flower tucked behind her ear. No veil, no jewelry, just her heart on display. And she had never looked more beautiful. As she stood beside Elijah, the room fell into a peaceful hush. Pastor Raymond smiled warmly at the couple. Today, he said, we are not just witnessing a wedding, but a testimony. A man who could not see, yet found a woman worth seeing. And a woman who was once invisible, now deeply loved. He turned to Elijah. Elijah Grant, do you take Ava Monroe as your wife, your partner, your peace, and your forever? Elijah turned his face gently toward Ava's voice.
I do, he said.
With all of me. Then the pastor turned to Ava. Ava Monroe, do you take Elijah Grant as your husband, your strength, your protector, and your safe place? Ava wiped a tear, smiled through it, and whispered, I do, with all my heart. You may now seal your vows, the pastor said. Ava stepped closer, placed her hands softly on Elijah's face, and leaned in for the kiss. It was quiet, respectful, tender. And then, suddenly, the choir began to sing softly behind them. But Elijah didn't move. His head slowly tilted to the side. His expression changed. His fingers gently touched Ava's shoulder. Then his voice trembled. Wait, Ava. She stepped back quickly.
What?
Are you okay? Elijah stood frozen. I can see a light, he whispered. Gasps filled the church. What? Ava said, grabbing his hands. I don't understand, he said, blinking fast behind his glasses. There's something light movement shadows. The doctor, who had been invited to the wedding, rushed to the front. It could be possible, he said. With time, your nerves may have begun healing on their own. But Elijah shook his head, still overwhelmed. He looked toward the sunlight pouring through the church window and whispered, This is more than medicine. Tears filled everyone's eyes. And in that moment, Elijah pulled off his glasses. He still couldn't see clearly, but he could make out a figure. A soft glow, a face, and a smile.
Ava.
He fell to his knees, this time not missing, and gently rested his head against her shoulder. The same shoulder she had touched the day they met. And just like that, the church rose to their feet, clapping,
crying.
Because the man who once came into that church broken and blind had found his home, his healing,
his wife.
Later that night, at their small reception, Elijah and Ava stood hand in hand. The lights were soft, the music low. Ava looked up at him. Do you regret anything? Elijah smiled and touched the wooden cross hanging on his chest, the one she had given him on their first day. Only that I didn't find you sooner. She rested her head on his chest and whispered, And I'll always be your eyes, even if one day you see the world again. He kissed her forehead, and under the glow of soft lights, they danced slowly. Not because everything was perfect, but because love had made it beautiful. That brings us to the end of this video. I hope you find the story worth watching. If you do, kindly subscribe to my channel for more stories. Like and share this video to your friends and loved ones. Your support and engagement encourage me to post more videos. Thanks for watching.